G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guest today is Daniel Fogg, CEO of Rootstock Labs, core contributor to Rootstock, the largest and longest running Bitcoin OG sidechain. Rootstock Labs is dedicated to making Bitcoin work for everyone. He's a serial entrepreneur. Daniel, he spent the last 18 years working at the intersection of emerging technology and emerging markets. And as a product strategist, former COO, founder, he specializes in leading product-led, operations-heavy, venture-scale technology companies. It's a very interesting chat with Daniel. We're really excited to have him on the show. Let's dive in. Tell us, what is your origin story? Very keen to find out, how did you get into, say, the blockchain world, and how did you end up becoming a founder?
So I, back in, I think 2012, 2013, I was reading a bunch of Wired magazines. I used to read a lot of Wired magazine back there. And that is when I first really came across Bitcoin and started getting excited about it. And I know this because recently I went back through my emails searching for Bitcoin and blockchain to see if there was anything in there. And I had been sharing excitedly a bunch of Economist articles and a bunch of Wired articles with people about it. So that is the kind of, those are the receipts. I didn't really start taking it seriously until 2013. A friend of mine took me to South by Southwest and was just like going, he'd been orange pilled and was going completely mad and was like, come on, you got to get to these talks, forget the hardware stuff, which is what I was working on at the time. Come over and check out what's going on in Bitcoin. And I think, you know, anyone who was aware of the space back then knows, like, you know, the UX was terrible. There were very few exchanges. It was very hard to interact with Bitcoin really in any way. And the adoption was limited, right? It was very much very, very, very early adopter. And so like, it wasn't easy to find the hook unless you were excited about the economic, philosophical opportunities of Bitcoin, which is what a lot of those kind of early movers were. I mean, fast forward to, but I stayed kind of engaged and was like learning about it. Fast forward to 2016, I think 2017, in that kind of big bull market that happened. That's when I got swept in. That's when I started learning a lot more about Ethereum. Actually, like, to spin back a few years, I actually have a very good friend who was quite active in the Ethereum community in the very early days. And she was telling me everything she was doing. She's like, yeah, there's this guy Vitalik. He's building this smart contract platform. It's wild. You need to get involved. And I was like, yeah, whatever. There's very few people who are actually early. But it was only about 2017, I started to take it really seriously, started to invest, started to learn. But it was in 2020 when I dived into the space more actively. Met Diego and the founders of Rootstock Labs, what was called IOV Labs at the time. You know, they'd raised a bunch of capital. They built this incredible blockchain, and they were building out the team that would work in the foundation, which is effectively what Rootstock Labs is. We're not technically a foundation, but more or less. And I said, look, this is too exciting not to be involved in. Loved what they built. The infrastructure was incredible at that stage, but we hadn't really, the ecosystem was very early. The tooling was very early. Real basic stuff like the number of wallets that had integrated Rootstock, lack of oracles, therefore inability to build out a DeFi ecosystem. There was loads of stuff that we had to do. And so, got involved in 2020, rolled my sleeves up mid-pandemic, and nearly 5 years later, here I am, took over as CEO of the of Rootstock Labs in 2023, and been building out ever since. It's part of my life's work. It's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a big deal as well to, coming to an ecosystem, and then, you said you really became interested, I guess, when Ethereum, or when it wasn't just Bitcoin. So there's Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden an explosion of smart contracts and chains and layers and whatnot. How did you then come back over to the OG blockchain, and kind of what attracted you then to Rootstock, or what the mission of Rootstock was at the time?
Yeah, I mean, the way I always think,
becoming an IO, doing some sort of IOC over here, or ICO, sorry, or diving into the Ethereum ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, the way I always think about it is, I'm, maybe to state my credentials, I describe myself as a Bitcoin pragmatist. I'm a I'm not a maxi, right? I'm here to work on technology, put technology into people's hands so that it makes their lives better. Now, something I've been doing for even before the crypto world that I've been involved in now for some time. But, what excited me most about Rootstock was, I've said this so many times, but it's so true. It was the combination of two of the most powerful decentralized systems that have ever been created, right? and a way to sort of ameliorate some of their weaknesses. So in the case of Bitcoin, you've got this incredible cryptographic mechanism, entirely decentralized, the most decentralized economic system that we've ever created or even conceived of, secured by nation state level compute power, with incredible incentives, used for storing and transferring value. Now, there are many people that would say, well, that's enough. That's fantastic. Bitcoin's good at this. It doesn't care what you think. It's, all these kind of sort of crypto maxims that kind of fly around. But the reality is, while storing and transferring value, albeit slightly expensive, is useful, and it's useful at a civilization scale, it cannot be the underpinning of a global economy. It is in itself perhaps a form of digital gold and a form of cross-border payment that can be trusted by nation states, but it is not. If you're going to build a truly new global economy, you need something more than that. Then when you look at Ethereum, so you look at Ethereum, you've got the smart contract architecture, the composability of the DeFi ecosystems that was then for the first time built out on Ethereum. You've got Solidity is the widest adopted by far programming language. It's got the best tooling. There's a kind of it's not really winner takes all, but Solidity and ERC20s and the EVM machine has pretty much. I mean, okay, there are alternative mechanisms to write smart contracts and build networks, but if you're going to build something that's globally accessible, that gets the most number of builders to build things on it, you kind of want to use the thing that everybody's comfortable with.
It has a network effect already, right? Yeah.
It has a network effect already. And by 1718, at the point at which, Rootstock was about to be launched, that had already happened. So, so you can't really do smart contracts. You can't do smart contracts on Bitcoin. But you also have this, there are elements of Ethereum's consensus mechanism which do not make it ideal as a store of value. And they don't make it ideal from a censorship protection, permissionless network point of view. So Rootstock's the combination of the two. And it was this combination that got me really excited. When I remember the first time I learnt about the way merge mining works, I was blown away. And still to this day, it's the part about Rootstock when I explain it to people, I do often get the response, they're like, what? Really? And then I kind of explain it one more time and I explain how no one else has really done anything like it before and hasn't even come close. And it's still surprising to me how incredible merge mining is. Would you like me to go into it? I'm happy
can you tell? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially how it secures Rootstock. What is it for people who are, brand new to it? What does it work? What does it do? How does it work? And what is the benefit for Rootstock?
Okay, so just from the there's lots of different ways that people describe Rootstock, but it is essentially a layer one blockchain, right? It's a layer one blockchain like any other blockchain. It often gets referred to as a Bitcoin L2. This is a concept that was ported in from Ethereum. Because it helped people understand what the Bitcoin scaling solutions, what the new sort of crop of Bitcoin scaling solutions were like. Whereas in Ethereum, a Bitcoin L2 means something very specific. In Bitcoin, it can mean all manner of different scaling mechanisms. So both Lightning and Rootstock, so a state channel payment network and a EVM compatible smart contract platform, two completely different types of technology, but they're both considered Bitcoin L2s within the kind of like record store genre categorization world of what we're doing, right? So it's a layer one blockchain. There's a couple of components to it that are important to get your head around. The first one is it's EVM. It's EVM, as I'm sure you guys know, but just for simplicity's sake, like 95% of all of the other blockchains out there, which means you can write Solidity, you can port smart contracts and protocols from Ethereum or any other EVM chain over with relatively limited friction. You can use ERC20 tokens, so you can bridge them over from other networks very easily, but you can also launch ERC20 tokens on the network. Now, this is all important because we were insistent that Rootstock could be used by the most number of developers and it had the lowest barrier to entry and the lowest friction for anyone building or merging or moving a protocol from one network to the other. So that's the EVM bit. I mean, a couple of kind of concepts. So what's different about Rootstock to Ethereum? So the first one is simplifying, we swapped out ETH as the gas token and we put in RBTC. Now, RBTC is bridged Bitcoin. So you basically lock Bitcoin in the two-way peg, and then you unlock Rootstock Bitcoin in Rootstock, which means you can then take your Bitcoin off the L1, move it into the L2, and use it. And maybe go into the power peg in a bit more detail in a second. The other thing that's novel about Rootstock is merge mining. So merge mining is essentially how Rootstock achieves consensus. It is a way to use the computing power of one network to secure a second network. So in theory, you could do this with any blockchain, but we merge mine on Bitcoin. So we use the compute power of the Bitcoin network to secure Rootstock. The way this works, this is a very simplified description, but the way this works is Bitcoin mining pools that merge mine with Rootstock, when they send the template out to the Bitcoin miners, to the ASIC rigs, saying, here's the next block we're going to be mining. If they're merge mining with Rootstock, there's a 1 or a 0 different in the template, and that template indicates that is a block that has been merge mined with Rootstock. And then on the Rootstock side, there is a whole bunch of elements that connect into that merge mining, and that is essentially how Rootstock is secured. Now, I'm abstracting away loads and loads and loads of details, but essentially you would need to take in why this matters and why this is exciting is that in order to reverse the network and undo transactions, you would have to bring the same amount of compute that was used to merge mine to reverse the Rootstock blockchain, i.e. the amount of Bitcoin compute that is supporting Rootstock is the same amount of Bitcoin compute that you would need to reverse the network. So today there are 26 different mining pools, merge mining with Rootstock. We recently went live with Spider Pool, and we also went live recently with Foundry, the largest Bitcoin miner in the world, along with miners that have been mining for a long time, like F2 Pool and Via BTC and Brains and many others. Mean that the hash rate that secures Rootstock is now around 80%. So that means that you need 80% of Bitcoin's hash rate in order to essentially cryptographically hack the network. That's why when we claim that Rootstock is the most secure smart contract platform in the world by compute power, it is effectively true. It's really remarkable. It's the second most secure blockchain after Bitcoin because there are no other blockchains that deploy merge mining that really come anywhere close. There are a few that we're aware of, but they're in the very sort of low single digits. No one's managed to achieve the kind of the 6-year, 7-year journey that we have to try and get all of these merge miners up and running and get all this compute on board.
Yeah, why wouldn't everyone who's mining Bitcoin also merge mine? Is it a factor of they have to be invited in, or is there are there kind of hurdles to have to get over?
No, and I think we had a little conversation about this before we started, which is that the relentless work of building out an ecosystem. I think a simplified view of how Bitcoin works is Bitcoin is this automatic system. It has no developers. It requires no maintenance. There are no bugs. But the reality is that's quite different. There's, I think, 40 or 50 core developers. There's all sorts of challenges they're facing all the time. And Rootstock's no different. There is a relentless, relentless work to build out an ecosystem, onboard partners, deal with issues that come up. And that's the same with the merge mining. So the barrier here really is that, we do work reaching out to the miners to try and encourage them to get involved. There are, incentives because they're receiving 79% of the fees that are distributed from the Rootstock network. The miners receive those fees to significant economic incentives, but it's mainly just awareness and visibility. We just haven't got around to them, managed to convince them yet. They certainly don't need to talk to Rootstock Labs. It's an open protocol. It's an open mechanism. Anyone, in theory, with a single Bitcoin miner could, in theory, also merge mine Rootstock. It doesn't even have to just be the big mining pools. Anyone can do it at home. So yeah, there's no barrier. Just a technical one. You just need to read the docs and get loaded up, and away you go.
Okay, so using the Bitcoin network to help secure Rootstock network, that's pretty awesome. How do you go, because the EVM or the Ethereum L2s, they're so prolific and well known. How do you go communicating the vision of Rootstock as an L1? Like, how do you differentiate, given that you can, like you said, port over Solidity smart contracts and EVM compatibility. How do you go about kind of helping people understand the differences of Rootstock to a generic L2 on Ethereum?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the ways we think about this is the alignment between Rootstock and Bitcoin is total. So there's economic, cryptographic, and monetary alignment. We support the decentralized business model of miners. You would need to fork Ethereum or hack Ethereum in order to hack Rootstock. So the cryptographic alignment's very tight. And then the monetary alignment's there as well. Rootstock's native token does not compete with Bitcoin. It is Bitcoin. You are locking Bitcoin in one and unlocking the other. So on the first time, we always talk about how any business, any protocol, any team that is long Bitcoin and wants the decentralized business model and decentralized community of Bitcoin to continue should also be a big supporter of Rootstock, because we are one and the same. We are we're separate for sure, and Bitcoin incurs no cost for Rootstock being there. But the decentralized actors within the Bitcoin ecosystem directly benefit from Rootstock being there if they're merge mining or they're pegging trees or what have you. So the first thing is, like, if you're within the kind of like small but growing Bitcoin L2, Bitcoin builder space, Rootstock is the OG. We've been around longer than anyone else. Never been hacked, never gone down. Mainnet's been up for 7 years. Most compute power, most performant bridge, etc. As you zoom out, though, there's a kind of broader question here, which is like, why does Bitcoin need scaling solutions, and what's wrong with Ethereum, Solana, etc.? And I think the core question is really how cryptographically secure are those protocols from hard forks, from nation state attacks? Are they hard enough? And I think that's where Rootstock's anchoring into Bitcoin becomes, if you think about this being this kind of cryptographic tank that can never be kind of broken through, or can like a safe that can never be locked, I think the anchoring to Bitcoin becomes crucial there. And then there's the question about, well, you're kind of connecting into something which is more in kind of wide debate across the crypto ecosystem right now, which is the value of Bitcoin compared to the value of everything else.
Sure.
And the value of Bitcoin today is, you've seen this, right? I think this is the first bull cycle where Bitcoin and all the other tokens have started to disconnect. Normally what we'd see is you have this Bitcoin bull run, capital flows from other markets into crypto, first into Bitcoin. As Bitcoin stays up, people take a bit more risk. They move into other L1 assets. Some time passes, there's a washout, etc., and then the cycle begins again, right? This is broadly what we've seen. That hasn't happened this cycle. You've seen this incredible run on Bitcoin, and then broadly, although there's been a bit of challenge over the last few hours, Bitcoin has held pretty strong, north of $90,000, $95,000, whereas the other altcoins has been a washout. We've seen 50% drops over the last, I think, month and a half. Some of the AI coins have gone down, over 50, 60%. So this is all the argument for saying, well, actually, and again, I'm not a maxi, but maybe Michael Saylor's right here. There really is no second best to Bitcoin. It is unique in its characteristics. It's unique in its adoption. It's unique in its technical capability. And quite frankly, it is unique in the interests of institutions to take it onto their balance sheet, to use it. You've seen the ETF launches, the most successful ETF launch in history. There really isn't anything close. What ETH does is quite fundamentally different. It's designed in a different way. It functions in a different way. So this is all to say that there's an anticipation here that over the coming years, the decades, maybe the centuries, Bitcoin is going to be around for a very long time. Forget the value and the number go up stuff, but its function as a store of value, means of exchange, and crucially in the case of Rootstock, as an anchor to a smart contract platform and other smart contract platforms, and DeFi becomes really interesting. So you got adoption spreading, more and more people taking it on, price broadly more or less stabilizing, institutions getting involved. So then the question is, okay, great, you've got your Bitcoin. What are you going to do with it? Well, I want to borrow some dollars against it. I want to lend it out. I want to generate yield. I want some price protection. I, want to use it as collateral to buy a house. I want to hold some on my business's balance sheet. You can't really do any of that on the Bitcoin main chain without a bunch of off-chain functions or institutions. That is where Rootstock comes in. It's all of the capabilities of an Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. So a lot of the use cases I've just listed are fully mature and available on Ethereum, but they are using US dollar stable coins and altcoins as the kind of currency. Not so in Rootstock, where you can run all of that deeply connected into the Bitcoin network. So our anticipation is that over the coming years, there's going to be quite a significant boom in Bitcoin DeFi. If you think about it capturing just the same amount as ETH and Ethereum, I think ETH and Ethereum about 17% is in DeFi, whereas Bitcoin, it's 0.2% of Bitcoin is in DeFi. And that alone is the opportunity, right? And that's at current price and current adoption. Again, over the years, as this grows, I think this is going to be really quite a significant part of the global economy, and Rootstock's going to be right there helping people build.
So you're expecting that, like Ethereum and EVM and maybe Solana and a few others have kind of been a test case or proof of concept of DeFi and things like this. But is the goal then to try to merge, in a sense, the Bitcoin and EVM ecosystems, or is the goal to just build a parallel ecosystem and then show basically how the Bitcoin ecosystem is superior, and then the Ethereum ecosystem will basically die a death because it's, the real
I hope it doesn't.
Show is over?
I hope it doesn't. I hope Ethereum doesn't die a death. I'm a big supporter of Ethereum. I'm an Ethereum maxi to a certain extent, right? So that aside, let me try and see if I can take that question apart a little bit. I think you're going to see a proliferation of different chains for different use cases. We've already seen that. We've got loads of app chains at the moment. I definitely think there's a huge amount of space for Bitcoin-aligned, Bitcoin DeFi-related chains like Rootstock. The other thing I'd say is we're quite conscious that, just to back up a second, there's an argument to say, okay, why didn't this happen 6-7 years ago? And the reality is Bitcoin's really hard to work with. It's very difficult to gain cryptographic anchoring into Bitcoin in any way. Now, you've probably been tracking some of the stuff that's going on with BitVM, which are these highly complex mechanisms to potentially build bridges to Bitcoin. Huge amount of work, some really great people working on this, and what's been built is this kind of Rube Goldberg machine, which does this incredibly complex thing, just to create something a little bit like an optimistic roll-up to a Bitcoin. And again, none of them are shipped on mainnet yet, so none of them are live or public. So it's not as, it can be done theoretically. It's not unproven. It will happen, but no one's actually managed to ship it yet. This is all to say that working with Bitcoin is really hard. So this is why Rootstock's taken a while, as some of the other Bitcoin scaling solutions have taken a while to spin up. This is the hard path. We believe it's the right path. But there's a kind of second point here, which is that as a result of that, you've got this kind of disconnection between the Bitcoin economy and the wider crypto economy. And the only way they are connected is through custodial Bitcoin like wrapped BTC. And that is not the dream, right? Some kind of Justin Sun affiliated BitGo enterprise holding, I think, I might be wrong here, but it's about 160,000 BTC, if I'm not mistaken, is held in wrapped BTC today. So there's a huge amount of compromise that crypto advocates, believers, builders, developers, etc., are going through in order to get Bitcoin somehow into other L1s. And again, this is like, I don't necessarily have anything against the kind of custodial Bitcoin model, but it really is not what Bitcoin was built for. It is not the dream at all. Yeah. It's an uncomfortable compromise we've all made because Bitcoin is such an incredibly valuable asset, and we want to use it in DeFi.
Yes.
So that's the compromise that had to be made. Rootstock provides an entirely new vision, which is that you can use Bitcoin anchored into the Bitcoin network on an L2 that functions exactly like Ethereum does, and yet you don't have to engage in this kind of like slightly compromised custodial model. The other thing that we're aware of is that it's very difficult for developers and smart contract engineers to actually build with Bitcoin, and for people and projects on Solana and Ethereum and others to actually access a form of programmable Bitcoin or access the compute power of Bitcoin. Rootstock provides that bridge. It's an interface layer essentially to allow any smart contract platform to integrate with Bitcoin. And that's something we're going to be building out over the coming years. At the moment, we're building this kind of standard semi-monolithic DeFi ecosystem like all of the other L1s have done. But increasingly, we're going to start bridging assets off the Rootstock network into other networks, and also allowing multi-chain and cross-chain smart contract functionality where you can connect into Bitcoin via Rootstock. But that's some of the stuff we'll be building out over the next few years that we're super excited about.
So is that the Riff technology we're talking about, or is this something separate to that?
No, it's a kind of reshaping of how we think about Rootstock. Riff is obviously part of it. Riff has a new home in the collective, which we can maybe go into. But it's more about how the BitVMX technology essentially allowing Bitcoin to be taken off the L1 or bridged off, locked in a smart contract and unlocked on a second network, can be done in a way that is massively trust minimized. That has never been done to that scale before. And the assumption here that everybody's making is if you can essentially operate your own bridge to Bitcoin, you therefore do not need to trust any intermediary. And I think that is the thing that people are really excited about, because that means, no custodian, no kind of like compromised bridge setup. You are bridging your own BTC. And we think that's going to be a massive unlock for getting BTC off the main chain. So that's one. The other stuff is really trying to just build out the tooling and the programmability of Rootstock to make it super easy for other protocols to anchor into it and to connect into it.
Yeah, man. On the bridge front, bridges have been the most amazing piece of technology, and also some of the most, for me at least, fear-inducing technology to try to migrate liquidity or funds to different places and go, you can do that now, but also with the number of hacks and the way that you're inserting trust into a trustless system, for me is just that's a crazy thing. So
and the trust assumptions, they just start to stack up, and I think that's the problem,
that's
right? You got one network, then you've got a bridge architecture, then you got another network, and then you're like wrapping, and it's like this is a slightly concerning house of cards. And you don't always, sure, the code is open source, but how many people apart from core developers are actually really checking the code of any smart contract before they bridge over? I'd say almost none.
Surely.
And so this is the thing. And like, if you can move closer to the Bitcoin L1 itself, those trust assumptions start to drop off, and the acceptability for using Bitcoin, we think, in the broader economy starts to grow.
Yeah, man. Well, so I really want to drill down into something else you mentioned, like talking especially about building out the whole ecosystem. One thing to say, well, we've got a really great piece of technology and we've built it, and now it's composable. You can all come and build on our really great piece of technology.
Build it, they will come, right? That's how it works, surely.
Build it and they will come. And I've seen many, fantastic pieces of technology turn into nothing because of this kind of the assumption that because it's better, people will come and build on it, or they'll take they'll notice that it's better and come over. But you've gone, well, let's have the amazing piece of technology, but let's actually build out the ecosystem as well. Let's show people what's gonna, how it works, and that it works, and then they can work on top of that as well. Tell me about at what point was that decision made to say, well, we're going to build it all. We want DeFi on Bitcoin. We need to actually build the whole thing. If we want to, have that trustless bridge thing, we got to build the thing. At what point did you go from, well, let's have a base layer of technology. Let's make this L1, and we've got it, got the merge mining into Bitcoin. That's really awesome. But instead, let's actually start the app layer as well.
Yeah. So if you think about, anytime you interface with, let's take a dumb suggestion here. Let's say that you're completely new to crypto and your friend has told you about a meme coin, and there's like, you got to get this, right? What you're actually doing is you're probably going to be on Solana. You're probably going to use Phantom Wallet. You're probably going to, you might check the price on CoinMarketCap. You're probably going to buy it from, maybe you buy it from Kraken. And then you're going to buy it from Kraken. And then because you've learned one or two things, maybe you kind of, you send it to your own self-custody wallet on Phantom. And then you are going to track it for a while. And then you're going to, you're going to kind of try and swap it in a DEX, right? Now, a lot of that, not all of it, a lot of it's running on Solana. But the reality is most of those products that you're interfacing with, they're not in any way, shape, or form built out by the foundation, but the experience the user has, how fast it is, did the transaction go through straight away, did the interface make sense of me? They will see that as a Solana experience.
Sure.
And so this was a bit of a breakthrough for us some years ago, where we realized like we need to think about Rootstock as a total product. So what is the total product experience that any user, any developer, any institution, any business is going to be having? What are those journeys they're going on? And aside from so what can we then do in terms of core engineering, in terms of the contribution we do to Rootstock to enable that? But then what do we also need to do to integrate certain tools so that they're available, make sure that the linkages between those tools are set up, make sure, just little things like make sure the price feed data is going in properly, make sure they've got the right icons. Like the dog work of some of these integrations is unbelievable. And anyone who hasn't seen it up close, they don't understand that even the most vanilla blockchain experience for a user is relying on potentially hundreds of current and former projects, which are all built together in order to enable that experience. And so a lot of what we do at Rootstock Labs is understanding that experience, understanding those use cases, and then doing everything we can to make them happen. Sometimes that's core engineering. Sometimes we'll launch an example protocol. Sometimes we'll help a partner integrate and we'll hold their hand. Sometimes we'll propose that two partners work together. And then there's all sorts of, I guess, what you call sort of DeFi primitives and sort of ecosystem infrastructure that also needs to come into play as well. I mentioned oracles. This is like, for anyone who knows anything about DeFi, they know how important oracles are. But the idea that in order, just very simply, to get a DEX up and running, you need an Oracle platform. And these are two completely separate organizations, two completely separate teams, projects, incentives, ecosystems. But you have this chicken and egg problem where you need one up and running before the other one can happen. And that is a simple articulation. So I guess the point here is that we realized quite early, and you'll see this in other ecosystems, there are very few, in fact, I'd argue maybe only Ethereum, that hasn't had to bootstrap its own ecosystem, where the foundation hasn't had to bootstrap the ecosystem in the early days. And unless escape velocity, and I mean real escape velocity, is achieved in the short term, that work continues almost indefinitely. Even in the case of Solana, which you would argue is probably the second biggest smart contract platform in terms of usage. If you look at their, what do they call their breakpoint events, they're very much designed to enable the ecosystem to get all of the updates, but also to bring the developers and the projects together so that they can work together on what's happening next. And so at the foundation, we do a kind of smaller version of that. You talked about building stuff ourselves. We actually, in the early days, we did build out some of the early primitives. We built out Oracle platforms, price feeders. We did template wallets. We built marketplaces, we built lending and borrowing protocols. So we built out a lot of the open source technology and then just basically passed it over to partners to get them to launch protocols in the network. We did some co-creation as well. We did co-creation with teams like Money on Chain and Sovereign, who were some of the early movers in the network, Tropicus as well, don't get me wrong. All those teams built that themselves, but we provided as much support as we could. We sort of were very active in the development and launch of those protocols. But as the ecosystem is getting bigger, we now have about 190 something protocols in the network. That we're less hands-on. We have a couple of protocols that we're guiding through development at the moment that we're really excited about. But broadly, what we're trying to do now is take the best-in-class DeFi infrastructure from Ethereum and the best-in-class DeFi protocols and bring them over to Rootstock. I think saying that Ethereum is a testnet for Bitcoin, frankly, is pretty unkind. And it's also really not understanding the work. I'm not saying you're doing this, but there's this meme out there. But there is a certain part of our integration strategy that's saying there's a bunch of stuff that got built out in Ethereum because it could not be built on Bitcoin. Now it can be. We're trying to bring a bunch of those projects over. And right now, to give you an example, we're in an open governance vote with Aave to bring the biggest money market to Bitcoin. Super excited about that. That will be a world first if we can pull that off. And there's Uniswap, where we were also the first Bitcoin L2 to go live on Uniswap. Same with SushiSwap. So we kind of have we've broke quite a lot of new ground in 2024. Does that kind of answer your question and talk about the direction of what we're trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we've got a lot of founders who watch or listen to the show as well, and so just even getting that perspective on what does it actually take to build something successful, I think is super helpful. That kind of that macro perspective or meta
it is
perspective.
intricate. It is intricate, connected work, which at its heart is about working with lots of different teams and lots of different human beings to try and build a collective project. And if you think about crypto, is that the global economy is this as a whole, crypto is its sector, but then in Rootstock, we're kind of doing this in Rootstock as well. So it's just knitting it all together, trying to figure out the different technologies and the different use cases that are necessary to have the maximum impact on the growth of the economy. And genuinely, our assumptions around how that works and how that should be are changing constantly. If you think about it, I remember someone telling me that like a pub, needs to be redecorated every 5 years, needs to be rebranded, redecorated every 5 years. People get tired with it, right? There's an argument that like a technology brand has to be refreshed every 2 to 3 years. I think that crypto, the narrative shifts are really quick. They can sometimes be super fast, but broadly speaking, every 3 to 6 months, we're in a different cycle narrative. Sure. And we have to make sure that we're responding to what the ecosystem and what the narrative needs and making sure that's available on Rootstock. It's just intricate weaving and knitting.
Yeah, man. I mean, one of my best mates, he's been around crypto for a long time, and he's basically now he's just an investor and trader, but he considers himself a narrative trader, and so to keep his finger on the pulse to the point where even because you'll have month-long narrative arcs, but then you'll also have week-long and sometimes hour-long and minute-long narrative arcs. And to try to keep your finger on that pulse and not just to follow the narrative, but to predict and to be ahead of the narrative. How do you think about this? Is it just about being in crypto or in blockchain a lot, and so you're already there, so you're seeing, or
No, I think
stick your finger in the wind and you see what's going on?
Yeah, some of that. You've obviously got to be responsive to the market, but you also have to have some conviction about long-term where things are going, because the inverse is true. You also can't be distracted by every narrative that comes along, every hype, every buzz, because that then is also a slow death, right? Because you end up jumping from one thing to the next. So yeah, I think the inverse is true. We spend a lot of time internally at Rootstock Labs thinking about which narratives support our long-term purpose and which don't. Which narratives do we think are good ones for the ecosystem that we should be trying to help build out?
Nice one.
And which ones do we think are not necessarily the right thing for our organization to be investing in, or maybe something that not necessarily the right thing for the Rootstock ecosystem to be building out. Now, just to back up a second, of course, it's an open, permissionless network. Anyone can build anything they like. But we obviously have some agency to try and fund certain use cases and try and get certain protocols to go live. But yeah, I mean, I would just emphasize that the ante is true. Like, there is a lot that gets built out in crypto and people get hyped about, which relatively quickly turns into just more noise. And I think trying to see through that, that is the art, and it's tricky. It's tricky.
Is that a team effort, or is that just you are very good at discerning what's happening, or do you have?
No, it's a team effort, 100%. I mean, it's a big part of my job, but it's also, I mean, we have a product team, we have engineers, we have founders still active in the business who are still very sort of focused on what's coming next. We try and track everything that's going on, but have this kind of more long-term thematic conviction that we're focused on. I mean, to give you an idea, a lot of what we're focused on in 2024 was making sure that Rootstock was providing a level of EVM compatibility and tool access that made building on Ethereum almost indistinguishable from building on Rootstock.
Right.
So there's a theme there which basically says, like, just support the developers and they'll figure out what they would. It's up to them to build what they want to build, but they don't need any guidance or suggestion. But if you're making it easier for them to build, then that removes one of the big barriers to anything going live. The other thing we had quite a lot of conviction about was that building a DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin with Bitcoin was also going to be something that we saw a lot of growth in, and we did. I think the DeFi ecosystem in Rootstock has like tripled in the last 12 months in terms of value. And just to give a little bit of sort of context here as well, this is with no liquid staking tokens live on the network today. So none of this is triple hypothecated. There's no double counting happening here.
Yeah.
This is either Bitcoin stable coins or natively issued tokens in DeFi. So it's a true DeFi network. It's not a massively inflated one, and there are many of those out there, I can tell you. But yeah, it's a team effort. It's a team effort, and also obviously we do hard analysis, but at the same time, there's a lot of instinct trying to just watch the direction that things move in and making sure that we're positioning ourselves as a sort of ecosystem supporting team to be open and ready for it when that happens.
Are there any narratives that you are keeping an eye on, or that you're expecting to kind of hit the meta over the next year or two that aren't currently very big, or aren't, maybe people aren't looking for them, but you guys are?
Yeah, I mean, the quick list is we're always looking for what we call everyday DeFi use cases. These are traditional financial use cases happening on DeFi rails, paying a bill, receiving your salary in crypto. They're almost always stablecoin denominated. This is kind of one. The second one is, we're super bullish on the Bitcoin DeFi potential and probably will be forever. We think there's an argument to say this is the use case for crypto. Right? It's like, I think Vitalik quite clearly was like, the core of Ethereum is essentially a DeFi platform. So we're looking at this. One of the things that we're looking at a lot in 2025, and all the other Bitcoin L2s and many other networks are as well, is yield on Bitcoin, how that's generated, the different ways that it's funded. So, and there's a stack, right? There's kind of yield generated through money markets, through lending and borrowing. There's yield generated through perpetual swaps. There's potentially an off-chain component to that. There's transaction fees coming from the network itself, which is a really good source of yield. That's kind of staking fees it's something similar to Lido staking fees in Ethereum, for example. We're starting to see in Bitcoin L2s, but also in the case of Rootstock, we're starting to tap some of the transaction fees that come off the Rootstock network, and instead of them coming to Rootstock Labs, we're starting to funnel them to the collective because we think that's a better sort of mechanism to grow the ecosystem. Then you've got stuff which is okay, but it's not sustainable, right? Like subsidies from the foundation. And then you've got Ponzinomics and stuff that, frankly, because it's an open, decentralized network, networks, people can offer these things, but really they're pretty unsafe and they're pretty unstable. And this is just, so we think yield on Bitcoin is extremely exciting. We think there's a huge opportunity here as institutional and Bitcoin native businesses start to demand to get return for their Bitcoin, and holding it in cold storage is no longer or just letting it sit on an exchange is no longer considered a responsible thing to do with it. We think that this is going to be a massive use case. So this is in Bitcoin DeFi. And then I think one of the things that I'm looking at that I'm particularly interested in is the opportunity for AI agents to use networks as well. Now, there's been a huge amount of hype, and there's been a huge amount of, we're very early in the hype cycle for this, and it happened very fast. I was looking at a graph the other day that showed the decline in altcoin asset values over the last 6 weeks, and it's AI tokens that have crashed the hardest. Obviously because of DeepSeek and the news around that, but there's also, these are very early projects. They got to go on their own kind of journey. But long term, I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in how AI agents and crypto fuse, specifically which chains and which protocols are going to be the easiest for AI agents to operate on behalf of human users. And I think there's something exciting that's going to get built out there. I think we're very early, but that's something that I'm actively watching. And obviously within that, Bitcoin becomes a native place to do it. And therefore Rootstock, as an extension of that, has some opportunity there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, man. Even, as you were mentioning before, or even before the AI component, thinking about at what point does it become too unthinkable to leave your Bitcoin parked somewhere rather than have it doing something. I think things like, the trust in the system obviously is a big one, and the friction of use is a big one. But yeah, the there's always the carrot and the stick, right? So
there has to be a reason.
Yeah, what's going to motivate me to go do something? It has to be fierce. Like getting it off the exchange, I would say that's just general wisdom. Get it off the exchange.
So let me ask you a question. This is something that I've heard in active discussion recently. How much? Yeah. Let's say let's say you've got 1 Bitcoin. Let's say it's in cold storage. What would it take for you to move it from your ledger, lock it in a smart contract? What percentage of yield would you require, providing it could be indicated that this is a reputable, secure protocol? What would it take?
Like 5. Genuinely, if I was going to say 20, but then I thought, actually no. If it's just going to be parked, if it's that that allocation of Bitcoin, which is just literally never going to touch it again, if I had 100% confidence in the platform, yeah, man, single digits easily.
Yeah. This is what we're hearing.
Whatever the inflation rate is currently, that would be it.
4.5% is what we're hearing. So we think this is going to get really interesting. We think that, and there's lots of different ways you can generate this. Some more centralized, some more decentralized. But we think that this is 2025. We're going to see a massive build out of sustainable forms of yield for Bitcoin on Bitcoin L2s, and the opportunity here is enormous.
Yeah, man. Because again, that's where it starts to become almost unthinkable to just leave it. If it's on the balance of everything else exactly the same, then yeah, get it over.
If you look at it from a business treasury management point of view, it becomes irresponsible.
Certainly, yeah.
So yeah, exciting. This is what we're laser focused on in 2025. We've got a couple of really interesting projects we're working on here to bring stuff to Rootstock that hasn't been achieved on any L2 so far. And so yeah, watch this space.
What is the Rootstock Collective, and how is that helping or a vehicle to making these kind of the vision for Rootstock actually a reality?
Yeah, so one of the best things and one of the most challenging things about Rootstock is that Bitcoin is the gas token. Now, on the one hand, that's what makes Rootstock amazing. On the other hand, it means that there is no shared collective incentive to grow the economy on the network. And so this is where Riff and the Rootstock Collective come in. So Riff, the Riff token was launched some years ago, 100% back in 2019. And we see Riff as the Bitcoin scaling token, i.e. it's a way to experience the upside of a Bitcoin L2 in a way that is connected to Bitcoin, but is not Bitcoin itself, and therefore has the opportunity to move independent of the Bitcoin economy. So back in late 2024, we launched the Collective. This is essentially a decentralized organization of builders and backers, where anyone can take the Rift token, stake it in the DAO, and then gain access to a whole bunch of different decision-making opportunities. So there's a kind of stack here. I'll just lay it out very quickly, which is that on the one hand, there are pools of funding that the Collective is choosing how it's allocated, and those pools of funding are mechanisms to grow the ecosystem. So you've got things like grants, marketing campaigns, things like that. The second level is that there is now a fee share. Now at the moment, it's being subsidized by Rootstock Labs, but in time, we're working on a way at the moment to take a portion of the fees from the Rootstock network and funnel them directly into the Collective. Now, when Rootstock was launched, there's a portion of fees, about 19%, which was there so that whatever entities were responsible for scaling the ecosystem had some funds to do it. So 79% goes to the miners, about 1% goes to the pegnatories, with the operators of the two-way peg bridge, and then the other 19% is to whatever organization is scaling the ecosystem. Now, for a long time, a lot of that came to Rootstock Labs, and we're going to be starting to send that over to the Collective. Now, those fees then get allocated out through what we call the builders incentive market, or aka collective rewards. I'm simplifying here, but it's a stream of funds, which are then there's a sort of game theory mechanism where the builders, these are protocols that have been live on Rootstock for some time, indicate how much of their share of the fees they're willing to give over to the backers. The backers are the people staking their Rift tokens, and they can then determine how much of their staked token power they want to put behind which backer. And then essentially there's this interesting little piece of game theory that happens to determine how many fees are allocated to which builder, and how much of the fees will then go over to the backers. So how much gets allocated to the builders, how much goes over to the backers. And what this means is we're sharing a portion of fees from the network to all of the protocols building on the network and all of the actors in the DAO that are choosing the direction that the ecosystem should grow in. What we're then going to do on top of that is start to push the fees and the control mechanism for many of the Rift protocols, like RNS, like the Rift Marketplace, like the Rift Wallet, and all of Flyover and Relay, and a bunch of other Rift protocols that are out there and live and generating fees. We're going to push those fees into the collective, and we're going to hand over the keys to those protocols as well to this decentralized group. And eventually, what we hope to do, and this is a long way off. There's no roadmap on this at the moment because we're still quite a way away from this. Essentially, what we want to do is to make the collective the controlling entity for the keys of Rootstock itself. Right now, that's the goal. Now, when sometimes we share that, people do get a little bit nervous. But the reality is we need to get serious if we're going to fulfill our goal of building a decentralized blockchain, which is EVM compatible and anchored to Bitcoin, but is controlled by an open community and not just supported by a foundation. We need to get serious about organizational decentralization, and the collective is our route for this. So anyone today can get some Rift tokens, stake them, vote on the grants program, vote on how marketing projects should take place, and get involved in the collective rewards scheme. We're excited. It's the first major DAO on Bitcoin. It's only a few months old, and we're kind of still figuring out how it works. And the collective foundation that's been set up to execute on the collective's will is now up and running. But yeah, this is a long project for us. So you talk about other themes. One of the themes we are long focused on is that organizations like Rootstock Labs are a temporary, necessary means to an end, and are not an end in themselves. And that you will need DAOs and decentralized entities like the Rootstock Collective if any of these networks are going to really scale. And that goes for all of the other L1s out there as well.
Yeah, man. When you said there's not really a roadmap, but is there a trigger for kind of winding down labs? Like when will you know?
It's a good question. It's a good question. When the ecosystem, when our work at the labs is not the work that is building out the total product, and when that's happening in the collective more than it's happening in the labs, that's the point at which we will probably start to shrink labs. I mean, I've made this public for some time, but my job is to destroy Rootstock Labs. Because if that happens, it means we've succeeded in creating a protocol that does not rely on a centralized organization for it to survive. Now, the faster we can do that, the better, because it means that we're more successful, but it's going to take some time, that's for sure.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you're hoping will, like between now and then, what are some of those elements that need to happen? Like what are you most hoping that you won't have to yourself build or provide, but that you hope actually comes on board?
Yeah, I mean, from the top down, I mean, like growth in transactions, active addresses, etc., growth in protocols on the ecosystem, growth in external contributions to the core Rootstock code base, increase in merge miners, increase in pegnatories, new bridge architecture going live, more increase in the node network. I think today we have about 330 Rootstock nodes active today, which is quite large. But I mean, you'd be probably looking in the thousands. But mainly it's about core contribution to the Rootstock blockchain itself, core code contribution to the Rootstock blockchain itself, moving out of being driven more by the ecosystem than it is being driven by labs. That becomes a big indicator for us that our role, we can now start to step back. Now, in reality, what would probably happen is the labs would shrink and become more focused on sort of secondary support to the ecosystem and to the network, and most of it would happen in the collective. But yeah, so I think it's mainly around, the kind of the ecosystem, the growth stuff means that the decentralized business model of Rootstock is running, and the miners and the pegnatories and everybody else is kind of benefiting from the growth of Rootstock, and it's reached a tipping point where it doesn't require push anymore. It's getting pulled by its own economics. But I think the real indicator for me is, are core contributions to the Rootstock code base itself being driven externally to Rootstock Labs? And when that happens, that for me is the point at which we can start to accelerate the shutdown of labs.
All right, gotcha. I mean, that's a big vision in its own right, to say, my job is to no longer have a job.
Make myself redundant.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, man, there are a lot more questions, many more questions I'd like to ask. We don't have time to ask them today, but I do like to ask one question to close out the show, and that is, for you personally, is there anything that you are particularly convinced of, or that you are, is there a direction that you're looking that everybody else is looking the other way, or you're expecting the future to come on this horizon, but everyone's looking over on that horizon, or any particular ideas that you feel like a salmon, swimming upstream on? Doesn't have to be to do with crypto, but it can.
Yeah. I mean, this is more of a worldview than anything else, but
Sure.
I have this, I'm simplifying here, but I have this worldview that everybody's winging
it. Yeah.
Right. Every major decision maker, every like large business CEO, every leader in a democracy, every authoritarian dictator, everybody's winging it. Everybody is making it up as they go along and figuring out what's the next step they need to make on the way towards their goal. Now, that connects into a broader worldview, which is that I find conspiracy theories fun because they're interesting stories. They're like examples of how human beings are trying to figure out what's actually happening. But they're fun for me because I'm a true believer that there are occasionally conspiracies. Of course there are, right?
Sure.
But they're very rare. What's really happening is, our world is a unfathomably complex, chaotic system, which no one truly understands and no one can truly predict. Okay, we can make estimations, right? But
sure,
like significant prediction around the direction of travel of things is I think human agency is in the medium term is pretty limited because of this chaotic system. In the short term, of course, we can make choices and we can move forward and we can kind of track ourselves towards goals and we can improve the likelihood that things might happen. But in the medium term, in the long term, yeah. And I think, myths around, hero founders and like genius entrepreneurs and stuff and how they just have this ability to always succeed. The amount of luck, chaos and randomness involved is actually the really amazing thing and the thing that's actually genuinely scary when you think about it. So yeah, my view is everyone's winging it and there is no destination.
Interesting. In our house, we tell our kids there are no grown-ups. Without them falling into despair. The system kind of works, but there are no grown-ups. And so, there's no one out there with all the answers.
100%.
Yeah, man. Hey, if someone would like to hear more from you, Daniel, or learn more about Rootstock, where can they find you online?
Yeah, inevitably on Twitter or X, so at Daniel Fogg, Fogg, and you can find our feeds, Rootstock.io, Rift Technology, and the Rootstock Collective for the main things that are going on in the ecosystem. If you want to check out some core protocols, some core communities in Rootstock, you can check out Sovereign, you can check out Money on Chain, the world's first Bitcoin collateralized stablecoin. You can bridge assets now for the first time using Layer 0 and Stargate from Solana, Base, Arbitrum, Ethereum. There's so much going on in Rootstock. Jump into the Discord, follow us on Twitter, and you can come and watch the world's biggest and first Bitcoin L2 on its journey. Its journey to a destination we apparently, according to me, don't really know. But we certainly have an intent, right?
Got a direction and a vision.
Got a direction.
It's good on you, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Really, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks so much. This was great.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Daniel and hope we've inspired you to think and learn more about Web3, about technology, about the future, and how you can be a part of building it. Please, as always, like, subscribe, and better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word. and join us again next week for another great episode of Off Chain. Till then, take care.